Today we'll continue our lesson in chapter 12, the Renaissance and Reformation, and we are doing section 2, the Northern Renaissance, and lesson 1, which is in pages 336 to 337. The title of the lesson is The Renaissance Moves North. Go ahead, open your textbook or go to our website, LODA-USD website, and from there, launch Clever, and from Clever, launch Cengage Learning and log in with your student account. And from the left side, you can navigate from chapter 12, section 2. Again, it is in page 336 or pages 336 to 337. The chapter's essential question is, how did new ways of thinking transform European culture? And the objective of this lesson is to describe how Renaissance ideas spread from Italy and influenced art and literature across Northern Europe. So Renaissance ideas spread from Italy to Northern Europe, and in lesson 2.1, this lesson describes how these ideas influence art and literature as they move north. Well, to give you an additional information, the 100 Years' War between England and France lasted until 1453, if you can still remember it from the previous chapter. When the war ended, cities in England, France, and other parts of Europe grew, and a wealthy merchant class developed. So this means prosperous business people began to sponsor writers and artists, remember, the patrons. In the late 1400s, kingdoms of Italy began fighting with each other. Many Italian artists fled to Northern Europe for safety. They began teaching their artistic styles and techniques to local artists in Northern Europe. Artists from Northern Europe also traveled to Italy, bringing Italian ideas back to their homelands. After the collapse or near collapse of the feudal system, trade and growth of cities spread the ideas to countries such as France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Spain, and England. Also, powerful rulers like kings in countries like France and England brought Italian artists to their courts. So these kings and queens became patrons of art, if you can still remember those who sponsored these artists to create masterpieces. So it is more of an influence rather than just straight up copying whatever is available from the Italian cities during this time. For instance, instead of focusing on classical subjects, artists of the Northern Renaissance often painted scenes of everyday life. So Italian arts are inspired by Greek classical art, and most of their paintings or artwork are a little bit dramatic, if you may. But Northern Renaissance artists from Northern Europe, their type of painting is a lot like what's happening in their everyday life. So just like in this painting of Bruegel, Peasants Dance in a Village Square. It gives us an idea the kind of life that peasants lived during this time. So as you can see here, there is music and dancing. Well, of course, there's a little bit weird of ratio and proportion of the sizes of the people here. I'm not so sure if the original looks like this or if this some sort of printing error from National Geographic Channel. As you can see from these two ladies, I guess, from the left side corner, they look amazingly short for the sizes compared to the sizes of the other figures in this painting. Anyway, another influential Flemish artist by the name Jan Vanek, or John, painted detailed, colorful portraits and images of religious subjects. Well, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with his wardrobe here. But anyway, the rich color in his paintings was largely due to his use of oil paint. Artists of the Italian Renaissance had mostly used water-based paints or watercolor to paint their frescoes. And this, of course, often faded quickly. So the influence is not just one way. When the Italian artists visited Northern Europe, they eagerly adopted Vanek's use of oils and brought the style back to Italy. The trade of ideas didn't go in only one direction. Another Northern European artist, a German by the name Albrecht Dewer, is often considered to be the greatest artist of the Northern Renaissance. Dewer visited Italy and absorbed the styles there. However, he combined classical ideas, perspective, and great attention to detail to create realistic paintings and woodcuts or images carved on blocks of wood. Well, of course, the Renaissance is not just limited to paintings and sculptures. It also involved writing. And when you say writing, it also involves philosophy and education in general. If you can still remember, the key idea in chapter 12, section 1 about the Renaissance is humanism. Humanism is the center of thinking refocuses from religion to the individual. One of the people that were influenced by the Italian thinkers is the Dutch scholar and priest Desiderius Erasmus. He is a key humanist leader in the Northern Renaissance. Well, to summarize his accomplishments, Erasmus focused on making classical works and Christian texts more accessible to ordinary people. In other words, besides translation, obviously, he made this literature more understandable into the simple language that common people understand. Well, for better understanding, most of the classical works and even the Bible was written in Latin. And because of this, a lot of people are not able to understand what was written in this classical works of the Greeks and the Romans, as well as religious texts such as the Bible. Another humanist thinker, an English statesman by the name Thomas More, promoted free education for men and women, which was a radical idea during this time. You have to understand that education was not for everyone at this time in history, and to do something like this is really something new and, for the lack of better term or other word, is really revolutionary or radical. Moving on to writing or literature, unlike Erasmus and More, the best-known writer of the Northern Renaissance did not try to reform the society. This author wrote tragic, comic, and historical plays filled with characters. Their passions, humor, personalities, and conflicts still capture our imagination today. Many people believe that the man who created these characters, William Shakespeare, is the greatest writer in English language. Well, in my opinion, I think he is definitely one of the greatest writers ever. Most likely, you've seen movies or read books that are inspired by his way of thinking, his style, his art, etc. Now let's go to the review and assess questions. For number 1, reading check. How did Renaissance ideas spread from Italy to Northern Europe? And for number 2, compare and contrast. In what ways did the artistic styles of the Northern Renaissance differ from those of the Italian Renaissance? And for number 3, synthesize. Based on what you have learned about humanism, how did the scholars and writers of the Northern Renaissance reflect its ideals? In other words, how did they live out or applied their ideals, their principles, this humanist, to their society? How did they help the people around them? Hint, go find the accomplishments or achievements of Thomas More. Now go to your Google Classroom and find the review and assess assignment. And in 2.1, which is the first slide, go ahead, fill up the last name, first name, class period, date. And of course, you need to put the definition of the key vocabs to the right side. Definitely the title of the lesson, and of course, the answers to the review and assess questions. And if you want to get a full credit, of course, you need to answer it correctly. That's number one. And write incomplete sentences. So that's lesson 2.1. The Renaissance moves north.